3D, a once novel concept in the theme park world, is slowly but surely fading away. Though screen-based attractions have seemingly found their foothold in modern day theme parks, you won't be needing these babies anymore, as we continue to see 3D attractions close en masse and have their maintenance pushed to the back burner, while some attractions that opened with 3D are dumping the glasses and switching to a 2D experience. Ultimately, to this end, there were several factors that all culminated around the same time, contributing to the death of the 3D theme park ride. But one misconception that people tend to have is that when they're thinking of 3D theme park rides, they're thinking of newer attractions, when in reality, 3D has been a part of theme parks for decades now. When 3D attractions first came about, they were mainly found at premium theme park destinations, think your Disneys and Universals. While Disney would mainly focus on 3D shows like Muppet Vision 3D and It's Tough to Be a Bug, they would seldom bring 3D to rides. Whereas their competitor, Universal, was not gun-shy about doing that at all. Though they had their own 3D theme park shows in Shrek 4D and T2 3D, Universal would be a pioneer when it came to creating a 3D theme park ride that wasn't just a simulator, but also moved about in a physical space with the Amazing Adventures of Spider-Man. And though it was far from an explosion of 3D theme park attractions through the 1980s to the early 2000s, both guests and theme park operators were seeing a massive benefit from them. For one, by using a screen instead of a physical space, operators were able to save on land, allowing them to allocate more space for restaurants and shops and just park pathways as well. Not to mention that the added space would also allow you to squeeze in more attractions, which if you think about it, for Universal in Hollywood and Orlando, they were extremely strapped on space throughout this time period and even to a certain extent to this day. By having screen-based rides in their lineup, they were able to get a lot more attractions into each of these parks than was thought to ever be previously possible. Screen rides also carried with them the added benefit of being cheaper than your average bear. I mean, yeah, you don't have to build the physical space, you don't have to build animatronics, you don't have to build a complex ride system, meaning yes, both their upfront and operating costs are lower than your typical physical theme park attraction. And yes, that's all fine and dandy for the theme park operator, but the guests also won here too, as screen-based rides were able to create experiences that previously were not possible with physical attractions, achieving both scale and action that you would not be able to replicate in a physical space with animatronics. A great example of this is Transformers The Ride 3D. Sure, you could make a massive Optimus Prime Transformer animatronic, but are you going to do that for every single Transformer that appears in the ride? How are you going to emulate the chaotic action that you see on screen? It would either be straight up not possible, or it would be the most expensive theme park ride ever built. The bottom line is, an experience like that would not be possible without the use of screens. And for a while, the premium theme park players like Disney and Universal kind of enjoyed a monopoly on this market. Occasionally you would see a regional theme park or an international park get into the 3D game, but those were much more rare occurrences, and ultimately 3D theme park rides were able to carry with them this sort of air of prestige, since the only place you really could find them were at these upper end echelon theme parks. That is until the cat got out of the bag. You see, this list of pros that Disney and Universal had kind of kept a secret to themselves for years, all of a sudden got leaked to pretty much everyone and their mother, and that was thanks to a little movie called Avatar. When Avatar came out in 2009, 3D was the big hot thing. You had to see Avatar in 3D, and of course, 3D came with an added premium upcharge experience, allowing Avatar to become the highest grossing movie of all time. So seeing the popularity of 3D with this movie, of course, everyone wanted a piece of the pie. All of a sudden, 3D theme park attractions were popping up left and right at regional theme parks, boardwalks, and even museums. With attractions that would be cloned around the world in SpongeBob the Ride 4D and Fly Me to the Moon 3D, that's a deep cut for you right there. The novelty and that air of prestige surrounding 3D theme park rides was gone overnight. The problem is, No one really realized it right away. Everyone kind of assumed that everyone loved 3D after Avatar, and this was the belief for several years after the movie's release, meaning that even the premium theme parks were hopping on the wave of trying to capitalize on 3D. And there was no bigger culprit of this than Universal, who went all in on 3D attractions with several new ones opening throughout the decade. This would all kick off in 2012 when Universal replaced a screen-based attraction in Jimmy Neutron's Nicktoon Blast and replaced it with another screen-based attraction in Despicably Me and Mayhem, but added 3D glasses. That was a sign that Universal was really all in on 3D and they wanted to squeeze it in wherever they could. This would be followed up by Transformers The Ride 3D, Harry Potter and the Escape from Gringotts, Skull Island Reign of Kong, and culminating in 2017 with Race Through New York starring Jimmy Fallon. They even went as far as to add 3D to a ride that had opened without 3D, that being Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journey when they opened it in Universal Studios Hollywood. The original version of that ride in Orlando did not feature 3D at any point in time. It was clear that theme parks had saw the dollar signs, not only from Avatar, but also from the cost savings of operating a screen-based attraction, and had ultimately gotten greedy. Now, in the case of regional theme parks and museums, their avarice ultimately didn't really end up biting them in the butt because most of these were built as temporary attractions anyways. They were either built in existing theaters that weren't being used for anything special and could just be replaced with something else, or were built in empty warehouses that weren't being used anyways. But in the case of Universal, they were building permanent theme park attractions that they were hoping would stand the test of time for 15 to 20 years. So with the regional players getting out of the game with no scars to show for it, it'd be Universal who'd be left holding the bag. And this didn't just mean the rides that were already built, this also meant the rides that were too far along in production to cancel. Which is why we see rides like Skull Island Reign of Kong and Race Through New York starring Jimmy Fallon open years after the initial hype of 3D had already died down. This would ultimately result in 2017 being the last year we would see a major 3D theme park ride open up here in the United States. And yes, of course, I am talking about Jimmy Fallon, but there was a ride that opened up just a month earlier from a character you might realize has been missing from the story for a little bit, and that's Disney opening up their Avatar ride, Flight of Passage, only about 8 years late from when the 3D hype started. But this is not to be unexpected. Disney always classically, fashionably late. But the decline in popularity of 3D didn't just go to the point where it's like, oh, we're just gonna stop building these. No, it got to the point where people actively were not riding the 3D attractions that currently existed in the parks. And this was concerning, especially if you're Universal, who's heavily invested so much into this type of attraction. But with certain 3D theme park rides still proving to be immensely popular, like Harry Potter and the Escape from Gringotts and Flight of Passage, and even one of the original 3D theme park rides, The Amazing Adventures of Spider-Man, still remaining relatively popular, Universal was able to hold out hope that these 3D theme park rides that they've invested a substantial amount of capital into would be able to still live out their entire expected lifespan. But then two things happened. One, Fast and Furious Supercharged opened in 2018 at Universal Studios Florida. Though not a 3D ride, it was such a bad ride that people had a bad taste in their mouth for anything screen-based. And the presence of screen-based attractions at Universal came under heavy fire, not just from annual pass holders and diehards, but also from the general public, as many people were now asking themselves, did this need to be a screen-based ride? And would this have been better if it was a physical attraction? And in the case of Fast and Furious Supercharged, and even Race Through New York starring Jimmy Fallon, the answer to both of those questions was no and yes, respectively. Combine this with the pandemic, locking people in their houses, looking at screens all day for years, and people come out of that yearning for physical experiences. And when they go to theme parks, those are the experiences they value the most, when something is actually physically present in front of them and not being projected on a screen. Ultimately, what this all culminated in was 3D becoming more and more unpopular. And Universal would ultimately cave to the pressure. T2 3D and Shrek 4D will both close their doors in favor of non-3D attractions. 3D would be removed from attractions that had previously opened with 3D, and Despicable Me and Mayhem, Forbidden Journey in Hollywood, and even just recently, Skull Island Reign of Kong. And even Disney seems like they're having second guesses, as a recent rumor stated that Disney is not replacing their old and broken 3D glasses on Flight of Passage, resulting in guests reporting blurry and unclear vision. So why is this targeted attack only coming after 3D and not screen-based attractions as a whole? Well, for one, like we mentioned, 3D has become a tired gimmick. People are no longer in shock or awe by what 3D is able to accomplish. If anything, it is actually kind of hokey to people nowadays. And given its presence in regional theme parks, museums, and even movie theaters, it's no longer this prestigious or special thing that makes worth paying hundreds of dollars to visit a theme park for a day to go ahead and experience. And as the Flight of Passage case clearly lays out for us, 3D glasses also add a cost to rides that are supposed to be cheap. You have to pay to replace broken or stolen glasses, you have to pay someone to hand out the glasses, you have to pay someone to clean the glasses, and you have to pay someone to collect the glasses after they get off the ride. These are all added costs that if you just remove 3D from an attraction, no longer are a problem. But let's flip it back to the guest side of things and recognize that 3D glasses cause motion sickness. For a lot of people, they get nausea even just sitting in a still seat with 3D glasses on. Nonetheless, wearing them on these moving motion simulators that are intense in and of themselves. And by the very nature of people getting motion sickness from this one aspect, it of course makes these rides less accessible, thus making the target audience for them much smaller. Meaning that people might just not show up to your park because they're saying, man, I can't really ride a lot of the rides there because they have 3D on them. Or maybe they're just not having as good of a guest experience because they have to sit out of rides that have this aspect. Or those rides are just seeing lower popularity levels because people are just straight up not willing or able to ride them. And when you consider these very specific issues that only really apply to 3D rides and not screen-based rides as a whole, and you begin to understand why 3D has become the target of this attack. And this trend doesn't seem to be stopping anytime soon. Disney has already staked their claim that they're going to be getting rid of It's Tough to Be a Bug. Now, it does look like it's going to be replaced by another screen-based attraction, but don't be surprised if 3D isn't a part of that. There are also other rides that seem like they could lose 3D in the future. I mean, Jimmy Fallon, this is a ride that doesn't move much at all. Taking 3D away from that, I don't really think would cause many issues. Escape from Gringotts being a Harry Potter ride, you might want to consider getting rid of 3D glasses from that, given that, it is one of your most popular franchises in the park. Having that ride be as accessible as possible would be a top priority for Universal. And though Universal has taken their stance against 3D, this is not an isolated incident for the company. There was a rumor not too long ago that Universal was going to make a VR attraction. I'm sure that absolutely would have stood the test of time, right? Well, good news is that they backed off on that. However, what they have gone forward with is augmented reality with the Mario Kart attraction, where basically the projections are being put onto the glasses themselves instead of on a screen. This seems like it could actually be a solid path forward when it comes to theme park tech and not just a fad like 3D was. However, it only exists on one ride right now. When 3D only existed on one ride, you could have been forgiven for thinking that, 3D is going to be the next big thing. It's going to be amazing. Every single ride is going to be awesome. Only for that to not turn out to necessarily be the case. So time will tell when it comes to AR, but what we do know is that with the existence of AR and just regular 2D screen-based attractions, there's no need for 3D anymore in theme parks. And as a result, we are now witnessing, in live action, the death of 3D theme park rides. Anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think that 3D theme park rides should stick around? Do you actually like them? Or do you think that their execution is justified? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear what you have to say. And I'll see you all next time. Peace.